Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of the show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, and spirituality. My job on the show is to invite world-class performers to share the practices to live a fulfilled life. Today's guest is Tal Ben-Shahar. Tal Ben-Shahar is an author and lecturer. He taught two of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology and the psychology of leadership. Today, Tal consults and lectures around the world to executives in multinational corporations, the general public, and at-risk populations. The topics he lectures on include leadership, happiness, education, innovation, ethics, self-esteem, resilience, goal setting, and mindfulness. His books have been translated into more than 25 languages and have appeared on bestsellers lists around the world. Tal is a serial entrepreneur and is the co-founder and chief learning officer of Happiness Studies Academy, Potentialife, and Happier TV. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Tal Ben-Shahar. And here is Tal Ben-Shahar. Tal Ben-Shahar, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
My pleasure. I would like to start off with something. You were studying computer science in Harvard, and then you moved to studying BA in philosophy and psychology. Why did you drop out of computer science?
Well, I was in my second year at Harvard. I was doing well academically. I was doing well in sports. My social life was okay. And yet I was very unhappy. And it didn't make sense to me because looking at my life from the outside, things were going well. But from the inside, they weren't. And I realized that it wasn't about the external, but rather the internal. So I decided to study the internal and moved from computer science to philosophy and psychology in order to answer two questions. One, why aren't I happy? And two, how can I become happier?
Why weren't you happy at the time?
Well, so there were various reasons. One of the reasons is because I had a false model of happiness, or rather of what it takes to be happy. See, I believe that the path to happiness was through success. So if I became a good student, going to a good school or a good job, then accomplish things in sports, then I'd be happy. And that's not the case. Today I know also there's a lot of research about that, showing that success doesn't lead to happiness. The thing, though, is that the relationship works the other way around. It's happiness that leads to success. In other words, if you increase your levels of well-being, you become more successful. You become more creative, more productive, more engaged, more energetic, healthier. So the model that tells us, and we inherit that model from whether it's parents or teachers or society at large. The model that tells us that success leads to happiness is simply false, and that was the model that I worked according to. That's what I pursued.
I come from India, and I was grown up in that culture that if you make a lot of money, if you're successful, then you will be happy. Why is it that in our cultures, in most of the cultures, we are conditioned that you got to be successful, you got to have a lot of money to be successful in life? Why is it that?
I think a lot of it has to do with our evolution. In other words, where we came from. Because in the past, we needed to accumulate wealth. We needed to accumulate food in order to survive. And today, while there are certainly many people around the world who are still struggling for survival, those people who are wealthy, they're not struggling, at least not financially. And yet they have the same mindset. And the mindset is that you accumulate more in order to be happy.
And it doesn't happen that way. If we keep accumulating, we are not bound to be happy. Do you know anybody in your life who has a lot of money and still be happy and fulfilled?
Sure, there's actually no connection between money and happiness, meaning there are people who have a lot of money who are happy, and there are people who have very little money and are happy. The thing about money is that it matters, but only until it fulfills people's basic needs. Beyond people's basic needs, money actually doesn't make a difference, or hardly any difference.
Before we get into the details, could you give us some background to our listeners who may not be aware of your work?
So my work revolves around happiness, and I'll share with you the story of how I got into the field of happiness studies, because for 20 years or so, I was involved just in positive psychology, which is the psychology of happiness. But over the past 5 years, I've delved more broadly into the field of happiness. So I was on a flight, a transatlantic flight, and a question suddenly came to mind. And the question was, how is it that there is a field of study for psychology, which had been my field, and there is a field of study for computer science and history and biology and geography and medicine and you name it, and there is no field of study for happiness? Yeah, there is positive psychology, but that's just the psychology of happiness. What about what philosophers had to say about happiness? Philosophers from the East and West. What about what theologians had to say about happiness, and neuroscientists and economists, and what about what movies and literature has to say about happiness? And I resolved at that point to help create a field that brings together what psychologists and philosophers and theologians and economists and neuroscientists all have to say about the good life. And it's a field, an interdisciplinary field of study. So for the past 5 years, that's what I've been doing. I created the Happiness Studies Academy, where we offer certificate programs in happiness studies. We'll soon be offering degree courses in happiness studies. And again, it's about looking at well-being from different or through different disciplinary perspectives.
What is this certificate program about in your Happiness Studies Academy?
So first and foremost, the purpose of the certificate program is to help people become happier and to help them help others become happier. So it's an intensely practical certificate. The foundation of the certificate is research in psychology. It's the foundation is deep scholarship. The ideas, whether it's ideas of Aristotle, Lao Tzu, the Buddha, Shakespeare, or Einstein, really looking at what very smart people who thought about the good life, what they have to say, what advice they have to give. And we put everything through the test of course, experience as well as science. So science is about research. Experience is about me-search. So it's through these two.
And speaking of Lao Tzu and Eastern philosophy, Dalai Lama, they all talk about that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, and happiness lies inside of us. There is no outside of, or we can't find happiness in the external things. Then why do you think people are finding happiness in the external reality?
Well, I don't fully subscribe to the notion that it's all about the inside. The external still matters, and it matters a great deal. Reality comprises both the subject, meaning me, the person who perceived, and the object, the thing that is perceived. It's very difficult. Maybe it's possible, but it's very difficult to experience happiness when you're also experiencing dire poverty, when your external reality is such that you don't have your basic needs met. It's very difficult to experience happiness when you're living under an oppressive regime. Maybe there are a few people who can remain oblivious to external circumstances, who can rise above harsh external circumstances, but there are few and far between. For most people, the internal and the external matters.
How much of internal and how much of external would matter in your research and studies?
Well, there is research that looks at it, but the research looks at averages, not at individuals. Let me explain.
Please.
So there's research showing that our happiness levels comprise three elements. One element is our genes. What we were born with, or our very early experiences, ones that we don't have any control over. The second element are our external circumstances, where we live, how much money we have, or how much material wealth we own. And the third element are the choices that we make. Now, the average is that about 50% of our happiness levels, again, on average, depend on genes and very early experiences. On average, external circumstances only account for 10% of our happiness levels. And then our choices account for about 40%, the remaining 40%. Now, why am I saying averages and why am I emphasizing that these are averages? Because let's take external circumstances. On average, only 10%, that's not a lot. However, you can be sure that a person living in dire poverty, the external circumstances matter a lot more than 10%. Or a person who is oppressed constantly, you can be sure that external circumstances affect their happiness levels by more than 10%. Similarly, for genes, there are extreme cases, both positive and negative, where genes affect a person's happiness much more than 50% or much less than 50%. And then there are the choices that we make. On average, it's 40%. But a person who is mindful, who is aware of the fact that they have choices, that at every moment in their lives they can make a choice, then that 40% goes up. So to say that very little is determined by external circumstances, yeah, that is true on average, but it's not very helpful for a person who lives under harsh external conditions.
In your case studies, you found that Latin America, Israel, and Australia, some of those countries are known to be happy countries. For instance, India, USA, they are huge countries and still people are not happy. Why do you think people are not happy in countries like India and US?
So the happiest countries in the world are countries like, as you mentioned, Israel, Latin America, some of the Scandinavian countries. And the reason why these are the happiest countries in the world is because there is, two reasons. The first reason is that there is real emphasis on relationships. So relationships in these countries is a priority. In the United States, for example, the priority is realizing the American dream. In the American dream, relationships are not really a part of it, or certainly not a significant part of it. So, and therefore, the United States is not among the happiest, far from it. In fact, a country like India, I think part of the reason is because there is a lot of poverty there. And I know that, some people try to romanticize poverty. And yes, there are people who are poor and are very happy, whether it's in India or Africa or the United States. However, in general, for most people, dire poverty significantly reduces happiness.
We talk about being in a gratitude state and finding things that we are grateful for. I would like to ask you, if somebody is not able to meet their basic needs, they are living below poverty line, or they don't have food to fill their stomach, do they need to be grateful for anything?
Look, we don't need to be grateful for anything, but it is helpful to be grateful. So you find many examples of people who seemingly have it all and are miserable, and then people who have very little and generally and usually celebrate life. So learning to be grateful, to appreciate, is a very important pillar of happiness, because as we talked about before, happiness is not just about the external. A lot of it, and potentially most of it, is about the internal.
Practicing gratitude, is it going to work for every individual, or there is any exception to the rule?
There are very few things that will work for all individuals. Gratitude will certainly not work for everyone. In fact, Sonia Lyubomirsky, who is one of the leading researchers in the world is in the field of positive psychology, has done research on gratitude showing its powerful impact on people's well-being. And yet she doesn't connect to the exercise. She said she's tried it a number of times and it doesn't work for her. She doesn't feel authentic when she does it. So the answer is it works for some, it doesn't for others. The things that are universal, that do work for others, are things like finding a sense of meaning in life. Now that is universal. Where people find that sense of meaning, that is of course particular. I may find it in writing, in teaching, in family. Someone else may find it in creating a business and making a lot of money. Other people find it primarily in their community or in going out and protesting. So different people find meaning in different things, and that is absolutely legitimate and fine. However, while that is unique to people, what is not unique, what is universal, is the need for meaning. Same with relationships. Relationships, that's a universal need. No person is an island unto themselves. We all need connections. However, there are introverts and extroverts. And extroverts want many connections. Introverts want few. Some people get their social fix from their family. Other people get it mostly from friends. Some people get it at work. So there are both universal aspects to happiness as well as particular individual aspects to it. And we need to be aware of both.
Do you consider yourself as introvert or extrovert?
So I'm very clearly an introvert.
And that is good to know.
and yet, when I teach, I act like an extrovert. And there are just like there are extroverts who, in certain situations, be it when they study for an exam or when they are at a funeral, they would act like introverts. So we have the capacity to act as one or the other. However, we also have an innate predisposition, which is biological, toward usually one or the other.
Is it possible to feel happy or to be in a state of happy mind all the time, or is it a combination of being depressed and happy simultaneously? Because the reason I'm asking is there are days when I get depressed, but overall I'm happy. I'm super happy.
Yeah, there aren't people who are happy all the time. If by happy we mean positive emotions or pleasurable emotions, all of us experience sadness at times and anxiety at times, and frustration and anger and envy. These are natural human emotions. And paradoxically, it's when we accept the full range of human emotions that we are more likely to be happy. In fact, the first step, as I see it, towards happiness is allowing in unhappiness. So giving ourselves the permission to experience the full range of human emotions is critical, is central to a happy or happier life.
What are some of the practices you would like to recommend to our listeners to be more happier from the level they are at right now?
So if they're not exercising regularly, that is the first thing that I would urge them to do. Regular physical exercise has the same effect on our psychological well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication. And in fact, it works in the same way. So regular physical exercise releases norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, the feel-good chemicals in the brain. So exercising regularly, and regularly means at least 30 minutes 3 times a week. Beyond that, beyond exercising regularly, it's also moving around. So sitting down for too long, day in and day out, is unhealthy. It's unhealthy for mind. It's unhealthy for body. In addition, meditation or some form of mindfulness practice I'm a yoga instructor. Yoga contributed to my life probably more than any other intervention that I've experienced. And whatever form of mindfulness practice works for you. For me, it's yoga and listening to music. And, for other people, it's prayer and mantra meditation. It doesn't matter. The key is to experiment and find what works best for you. And by the way, what works best for you today may not be what works best for you 5 years from now.
And you talk about guided meditation to be happy in your certificate programs. What's your personal guided meditation or mantra-based or transcendental meditation?
Yes, so I do a breath meditation, just focusing on the breath going in all the way down to the belly and then out. I do a lot of mindful music, and I practice yoga.
What is mindful music?
Just, there are various ways of listening to music. One way is in the background. So you're doing something else, you're talking, you're working, and there's music in the background. Then there is also mindful listening, when your primary focus is on the music, eyes closed, just as you're in a meditation, focusing on the notes, focusing on the words, focusing on whatever it is that you're listening to at this moment. There's John Kabat-Zinn, wherever you go, there you are. That's the essence of mindfulness. So you can be mindful when you're listening to music. You can be mindful when you're walking, when you're working, or when you're in a conversation with a person. And regardless of where we're mindful, there are significant benefits to being in that state.
And we can be mindful about eating.
We can be mindful about eating. I was recently at a day-long meditation retreat, and the instructor had us eat a raisin for 15 minutes.
For 15 minutes?
15 minutes, one raisin. It's not something I would recommend anyone on a regular basis. You won't get far in life if that's how you eat. But it was a very powerful practice.
Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, recommends that mindful eating.
Yes, and Thich Nhat Hanh also recommends walking meditation and meditate and mindful listening. You see that there can be formal and informal meditation. Formal meditation is sitting down or and focusing on the breath going in and out, or doing a yoga practice or a qigong practice. That's formal meditation. And then there is informal meditation, which is about being present wherever you are, whatever you do. It's a little bit like formal and informal exercise. Formal exercise is going to the gym or going out for a run or a swim. Informal exercise is going about our day-to-day and getting exercise through that. So, climbing up the stairs in our home, or walking to the store and back. So these are informal ways of exercising, and both are effective, just like formal and informal meditation. Both are effective.
Got it. I would like to ask you something very funny. How would you explain happiness to a small kid?
I wouldn't explain happiness to a small kid. I don't think they need to start analyzing happiness. I think what kids need more than anything is role models, but even more than that, they just need time, and that is important, because in today's world we're stealing time from kids. We're not giving them free time. Why? Because we're filling up every moment with something, something that will help them make it, help them get farther, help them be more successful. Because we really believe, or most people believe, that is what will make them happy. What kids need is a lot more free time to just play around, to be bored, because it's out of boredom that you learn to be creative and to entertain yourself. Blaise Pascal, who's a French philosopher, once said that all of men's misery are a result of his inability to be by himself in a room. We're so obsessed with doing that we've forgotten about being.
If children don't need to understand happiness, then according to you, who needs to understand more about this?
Well, once children grow up and they get to a stage where they can understand abstract concepts, then we can certainly introduce them to the idea. Before that, it's about having them do things that make them happy. Action is more important than words at this stage. So it's about doing nothing or playing, being with people, learning new things. All these are important sources of happiness. Moving around a lot, of course. We can also teach them mindfulness in a delicate and accepting way. But it's all about them encouraging action that will lead to happiness, as opposed to talking to them about happiness.
Do you talk about journaling prompts? Is it still applicable in our modern life?
Probably more than ever. There's a lot of research on journaling and on the importance of journaling. And journaling can help us overcome difficulties and hardships. It can help us express our emotions. It can help us figure out things. So we're able, the world is becoming more and more complex and more confusing. And therefore, journaling can help us make sense of the world. Anxiety levels are going up by the minute, and journaling can help alleviate anxiety. So whether it's journaling about difficult experiences, whether it's gratitude journaling, different forms of journaling are very helpful and very important for happiness.
Do you have any specific practice in your personal life, or I should say journaling specific practice, or you do a combination of these practices every day?
Yes. So, I usually free associate. So I have, when I do journal, I have something on my mind. I just don't go in and see what comes up. So there's something on my mind and I sit down and I write about it, but I just write. And I don't think about grammar and I don't think about making it sound good. I just write because the journal is for me to figure out what's going on, for me to experience what I'm feeling. So that's the most common form of journaling for me. Another form that I've used over the years and once in a while go into is a technique that was devised by Nathaniel Branden. Nathaniel Branden was my mentor. He passed away a few years ago. He was considered the father of the self-esteem movement, and he devised a technique called sentence completion. And sentence completion and I recommend you look it up. It's a very powerful technique, and essentially what it is, it's starting with a sentence stem, with the beginning of a sentence, and then you journal and complete that sentence stem with 6 to 10 endings. And again, you write as fast as you can without thinking. Just let your subconscious and conscious mind go wild.
Can you please give us some instance on this?
Okay, so here is an example. If I bring 5% more acceptance to my life, ... So if I bring 5% more acceptance to my life, and then you complete the sentence, and then the completion could be, I'd be happier, I'd make more mistakes. If I bring 5% more acceptance to my life, people will like me. If I bring 5% to my people will not like me. If I bring 5% more acceptance to my life, I will become more afraid. I will be more courageous. Whatever comes out, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense. Sometimes contradictions come out. Now, after you write, at least 6 endings, then you can go and analyze it and look at it. Before, you just let it come out. And this form of journaling, therapists are using it today, coaches are using it today, people use it on themselves. And it's one of the techniques that is very simple, very accessible, And I do it myself and encourage my students to use as well.
This practice sounds simple, but this is not simple.
No, it's not simple. However, it is accessible, meaning it doesn't take long you don't need to become good at it. You can just do it, and first time you're already on top of things, meaning if you're open enough with yourself, you gain benefits right off the bat. And you can do it for anything you want to work on to bring 5% more joy to my life, ... If act more generously towards people, ... Whatever you want to work on in your life, you can use as a sentence stem.
This is amazing. And you have mentioned a lot of practices in this conversation. And I would like to ask you, whenever you feel any negative emotion in your life, do you have any favorite tool that you pick from your toolbox, or do you talk to your friends, or what do you do generally?
Yeah, so first of all, I do not classify them as negative emotions. I classify them as painful emotions. Painful emotions are just as natural as pleasurable emotions are. When I do experience them, I do a few things. The first thing that I do is I embrace them. There's a wonderful poem by Rumi, the Sufi poet, called The Guest House. And the guest house is about inviting in any and all emotions, embracing any and all thoughts. And this idea of a guest house is, today we have a lot of research showing how important it is for well-being. So the first thing that I do with painful emotions is embrace them. The second thing that I do is, I would write about it in my journal or talk to my wife or best friend about what I'm feeling. And the most important thing, I remember that what we do is more important than what we feel. And let me give you just a couple of examples. I may experience a great deal of fear and anxiety over doing something. And yet I can go ahead and do it anyway. You see, courage is not about not having fear. Courage is about having fear and going ahead anyway. What I do matters more than what I feel. I'll give you another example. Let's say I experience envy towards a friend. Now, envy is a natural emotion. There's nothing good or bad about envy, just as there is nothing good or bad about the law of gravity. It's part of nature. At the same time, I can experience envy and still choose to act generously and benevolently towards my friend. And in fact, I'm more likely to act generously and benevolently towards someone if I first accept and embrace envy. If I reject and suppress envy, it's more likely to control me.
It's about accepting all the emotions, be it negative emotions. We usually accept all the positive emotions, but we need a lot of awareness when we are going through any painful emotion, as you say, not negative emotion.
Yes, embracing the emotion and truly embracing it. There's some talk in Buddhism, and today there is research around it about two levels of suffering or two levels of pain. The first level is unavoidable. We all experience it because you're a human being, so we experience some of these emotions. The second level of suffering is when we do not accept the first level. So if, for example, I would say to myself, I'm feeling anxious, and I would say to myself, Tal, you're not supposed to be anxious. You're supposed to be beyond that. Well, that will add another layer of anxiety to the initial one. Whereas if I accept and embrace the anxiety that I experience, I will not experience the second level of anxiety. And not only that, the first level will not overstay its welcome. It will go out just as it came in, as a guest.
Do you have any favorite teacher, or it could be any spiritual teacher or anybody that you always go to? It could be virtual or in person.
Yes, so I've been very fortunate to have very good teachers in my life. So my role models still today are my parents, whom whom I speak to every day and whom I learn from and admire greatly. I've had teachers in school. So the person who introduced me to the field of positive psychology is Professor Philip Stone, who alongside Marty Seligman was one of the founders of the field. I have teachers whom I've never met. I see Aristotle as being one of my mentors. Confucius is one of my mentors. Lao Tzu. So, I'm so grateful that people throughout history have written books, have communicated their teachings to others, so that we today can benefit from them.
I love the philosophy of Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching. I would like to ask you, is there any quote you live your life by, or any quote that comes to your mind that reminds you to be more grounded?
Yes, I like quotes. So there are quite a few quotes that inspire me. One of them is one that I think inspires many people around the world, which is Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. In fact, small groups of people have always changed the world. So, that's inspiring to me. Another is Albert Camus. In the midst of winter, I found within me the summer. So, reminding me that in hardship, we can grow and learn from it. And then, I have another quote that really inspires me is one by David Schnarch. David Schnarch is a relationship psychologist, and he talks about within relationships, the key is to know and to be known. To know and to be known. And it's by getting to know your partner and by you opening up and being known by your partner. That's how you form, that's how you create intimacy.
That is so profound. To know and be known. I love it. Do you feel that attachments with people, attachments with things lead to unhappiness in life?
Well, it depends what we're attached to. So, of course, I'm familiar with the idea from Buddhism about the importance of non-attachment. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe the Buddha reached that state. Maybe the Dalai Lama has reached that state. I don't know. I certainly haven't. And I don't think most people have or will reach that state. So the question is, what are we attached to? If we're attached to or severely attached to accolades and to prizes and attached in an obsessive way to external success, then I think it's a problem. It's something that we should work on. But the way to work on it is not to chastise ourselves and to bash ourselves. The way to work on it is, first of all, to accept it, to embrace it, and then to ask, what kind of life can I lead? What action can I take? Because action is more important than feeling.
Right.
What action can I take to lead a life that I would approve of, rather than a life that would be approved by others?
Is there a possibility that we attain optimum level of attachment and still be happy? I'm just making it up.
Yeah, I think some attachment, again, is inevitable certainly for most people. And there can be healthy attachment, the being attached to quality writing. I'm attached to the quality of my writing. I don't think it's unhealthy. Now, it doesn't mean that if I have a day where I don't write well, or if I have a book that doesn't measure up to my standards, or then not the end of the world, but it doesn't mean I'm not attached to it. I still experience sadness or disappointment or frustration. So there are degrees of attachment. It's not a binary 0-1. And some attachment, as I said, is inevitable, and some attachment we can also leverage for good.
And that sadness could be a measure to improve next time.
Yes, exactly. It could be a form of motivation. By the way, just like the emotion envy, I don't like it, but I experience it, and yet I can turn envy into hard work and investment. So even the painful emotions that we are, or the things that we're attached to, we can, in the words of Freud, sublimate or channel towards positive ends.
Got it. And before we conclude our conversation, I'm having two questions in my mind that I would love to ask you. What are some of the things you have changed your mind about in the last few years? You believed maybe 2 years ago, but now you don't believe in that. Is there anything?
Yes, I think the most radical change in my thinking, and it's more than 2 years, but certainly over the last 10 years, has been around expectations. So this is also the way I taught it throughout the years. I talked about how expectations are important to happiness, and how high expectations are important to happiness. Whereas today, I also see the importance, the value of lowering expectations. Now, not expectations necessarily in terms of success. I actually don't think that matters that much. So yes, high expectations lead to more success. It doesn't necessarily lead to more happiness. But expectations about the kind of life that we can lead, the amount of happiness that we can attain. If my expectation was extremely high once about being happy all the time, it's no longer that. Today, I think I have more realistic expectations. And even though, over the years, I have become more and more of an expert in this field, that doesn't mean that I can be exempt from painful emotions. So lower expectations about my experience.
And this is a great distinction. You mentioned that sometimes lowering expectation doesn't mean that we are incapable of doing things, or because too much expectation sometimes can lead to suffering and unhappiness.
That is correct. But we need to make a distinction between expectation in terms of outcome and expectations in terms of experience. Having expectations in terms of outcome, that can actually lead to higher levels of performance, and that's great. It's not the path to happiness, but we want to achieve things or most people want to achieve things in life. At the same time, expectations about our experiences, that needs to change. For example, going into a relationship and expecting that we'll live happily ever after, that is actually a prescription for unhappiness.
Love it.
All relationships, even the best of them, there are ups and downs, and it's important to have realistic rather than unrealistic expectations.
I have one quote that I remind myself, and this quote is from my mentor. He lives in LA. So he talks about that. Don't be attached to the outcome, but be in a relationship with the outcome. Just do your best, give your best efforts to get to your outcome. But if it doesn't work, try something else. Don't be too attached.
Yeah, I like that a lot, having a relationship with the outcome.
Great. And my last question to you is, what are you most excited about in 2020 and in upcoming years?
Right now, professionally, that is what I'm most excited about, is continuing to build the Happiness Studies Academy. So building it into an academic institution. I'm very excited about the certificate program that we're offering, very excited about the master's degree that we're delivering, and ultimately the doctorate degree that we will be offering. So I'm very excited about helping to create this new field of study, happiness studies.
That is awesome. And I will put all your social media links, all your happiness study certificate program links in the show notes so that our listeners can get into that and learn more and enroll into the programs. Great, sir. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It has been an amazing, happy, fulfilled conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Nishant.
Thank you so much.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.